Hello and welcome back to James Kelly Speaks, and I am discussing the second video in the sequence, specifically on the glucocorticoid neurotoxicity model of parental alienation. This is probably about the fourth one in the series. I left off at this particular piece of case law, Troxel v. Granville. But now I'm returning to the stresses that are induced in the child as a function of the dynamic that occurs. Now, we've just covered the cognitive dissonance from having two different views of each of their parents. But there is another additional stress that's important to consider. It's the ambiguous loss of both parents. This parent is physically absent but emotionally available, while this parent is physically present but emotionally unavailable. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different stresses at the same time that child is experiencing, and it doesn't stop there, because now we have covert domestic violence by proxy of the child in the form of parental gatekeeping, which is psychological and emotional child abuse. I want you to notice, I didn't say parental alienation was child abuse. Parental alienation is not child abuse. And I know I've just ruffled a whole lot of feathers if you're emotionally invested in that particular perspective. Parental alienation cannot happen without child abuse, but parental alienation in and of itself is the action of a child in response to child abuse. So, I'm a big proponent about using the correct terminology. Parental gatekeeping is this parent keeping the child from that parent. And when that happens, that is an emotional and psychological abuse of the child in an attempt to abuse the other parent, because they can no longer directly abuse the other parent. So, what happens is, as a function of this, the child will eventually cut off this relationship or alienate this parent. This is not abuse. This is a child's defense mechanism against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different stresses at the same time. And when the child is exposed to that prolonged, abnormally high level of stress for a prolonged period of time, it becomes neurotoxic to the child's developing brain. This defense mechanism of parental alienation is not the child's conscious intent. This is on the level of shivering. If you put a child outside in the wintertime without a coat and it's cold, that child is going to shiver. That's the child's body's the child's body's naturally occurring defense mechanism against the cold. All right, it tries to warm itself up. Parental alienation is the naturally occurring defense mechanism against glucocorticoid neurotoxicity. When this parent is unable to protect the child from this abuse, and this parent is unwilling to protect the child from this abuse. So, this is an important slide to really and truly understand, because this is fundamentally the 5 points of the dissection of the betrayal bond. Now, you end up as a function of this relationship here with a cross-generational coalition against that parent. So this parent and that child look like they have a great relationship. It is indistinguishable from a loving relationship to most people. But it's a relationship based in fear, not in love. And most professionals will miss that. So let's move on. We have the child doing the only thing that child can do in the face of what it's presented with. And it starts to work on reducing the neurotoxic levels of stress. It does that by resolving the cognitive dissonance in the only way that it can. It sees this parent as the loving parent, and it sees this parent as the threat. There is no other option. It cannot resolve the ambiguous loss. It cannot stop the covert domestic violence by proxy. The only thing it can do is choose how it chooses to view the cognitive dissonance. That brings down 2 out of the 5. Now, in doing that, there's the shared delusion with the empathy impaired parent, and that is one of the 3 criteria in attachment-based parental alienation, the most correct model, in my opinion, within modern psychology as to how a child does it. It's just incomplete. The model, the Gardnerian model of 8 criteria can be mapped into that. In fact, I've done that in a paper that I've published on www.endparentalgatekeeping.com. So, we have this parent that won't rescue the child, this parent that can't rescue the child, and we have the child starting to execute on the different resolutions it can do. Now, the next one is it switches positions with that parent. So it makes that parent less than. This is the perverse triangle, where the child sees themselves above this parent and equal to that parent. And now you've got the narcissistic abuse and reversal of hierarchy involved. This is a function of the child's stress. But notice, it takes the child out of abuse by proxy. And it puts the child in the position of being special because it's up here with the other parent and treating that parent poorly. This is something that the child is uncomfortable with in one respect, but yet grateful that it's out of the abuse from the other perspective. So, in terms of the stress, well, yes, the stress has made the child's brain a little bit plastic and leaned it towards that direction, but it's also got the learned behaviors of this parent, and well, the court goes along with this parent, so maybe there's something it doesn't know. So, if the empathy impaired parent, or the least empathy impaired parent here, attempts to act as a legitimate parent, that is going to be stressful to the child. And the child's going to break that attachment. So, going back here, you have the first is the resolution with the shared delusion. The second is the narcissistic behavior with respect to the other parent. That's the second of second of 3 criteria for attachment-based parental alienation. And now you've got the broken attachment, because when this parent tries to use discipline or do anything that a normal parent should be able to do, the child just cuts off. And there is the third and final criteria for attachment-based parental alienation from a stress response perspective. If you're looking for something that is from a psychological perspective only, I do recommend Dr. Craig Childress's hour and 48-minute video on YouTube. It is a fantastic primer, and there is nothing on these 2 models that conflict. Nothing. So, you now have these 2 stresses that remain, but the child has taken 3 out of the 5 out of the picture. So these 2 stresses ultimately go on to contribute to the slight increase in stress level that would be consistent with the prolonged adverse health consequences later in life, as described by the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And I think it's important to recognize that the human body can take a tremendous amount of stress for a very short period of time. However, it is very, very sensitive to a prolonged cumulative lifetime dose in small amounts over a long period of time. Not enough people look at the cumulative lifetime dose of supraphysiologic glucocorticoids that somebody experiences. And certainly if that perspective is viewed, where, say, somebody takes corticosteroids for years and years and years and decades, you look, or at least doctors should look at the above normal cumulative lifetime dose of that particular medication, which is a glucocorticoid. And that's what does the damage. That's truly what does the damage. Now, I'm going to stop at this point for a second, and I'll continue on in the third part. But you have a situation where when the child ages out, the third parent disappears. The shared delusion remains. The ambiguous losses remain. This parent is still seen as the loving parent. This parent is still out of the picture. And unless that child revisits that shared delusion, nothing changes. That child needs to have complete autonomy as an adult in order to be able to look at that, needs to feel safe both physically and emotionally to be able to revisit that. And this parent needs to understand when that child comes that there's going to be some challenges, some very specific challenges that need to be addressed in a very specific way. So I ask you to like this video. I ask you to share this video. I ask you to subscribe to this channel. I ask you to go to my Facebook group page, the Petition to Scientifically Study Title IV, and like that. Please look at the petition, sign the petition, and share it, because this needs to be understood better. Thank you very much, and I will continue on momentarily in the third video.